I'm Nick Halsey. I'm a student in civil engineering here, and I'm also a student worker for Annenberg Digital Lounge, and I'm a core contributor to WordPress. So I know a lot about WordPress, and today I'm going to give you a very basic introduction to what WordPress is, what you can do with it, and why you should use it. And so WordPress is a lot of different things. Originally, it was focused on being primarily a blogging platform. Over time, people started using it more as a content management system to basically manage the content that would be displayed on a website. And now it's starting to be used more and more as an application framework. And so it's a way to do more advanced things, so such as e-commerce or other things where you have multiple different types of objects being managed sort of in a database and then in some way being displayed through WordPress, and basically as a framework for doing different things. But ultimately, it's a personal publishing platform, and so that means it's a way for you to publish content and basically get your voice out online in whatever means you want, and basically anything that you have to say or any idea that you have, in theory, you should be able to express that online via WordPress so that you have a web presence. WordPress is really popular. This chart shows the breakdown of different content management systems and basically any software that's being used to run a given website. 23% as of this month of the internet is on WordPress. The next biggest management system, Drupal and Joomla, both have 2% of the internet, and then everything else is basically less than 1%, and there are hundreds and hundreds of different systems that you can use. And then the biggest chunk there, of course, is none, and those are sites that aren't using any sort of a management system at all, and so those are just manually coded and put up on the internet. Of course, that means those are typically going to be less prominent sites that aren't updated as frequently. So 23%, and we call it of the internet, it's of the top 100 million websites, which is basically representative of the internet. And so any given website that you would visit on a given day, odds are it's probably using WordPress. And so I have a whole bunch of examples in here of different sites using WordPress. So I'm just going to sort of go through these. So this is like a design firm. And as you can see, they have sort of some different pages on their site. And then right here, they have a portfolio of different projects. This is another, I think this is an individual graphic designer, creative strategist. And so here the website's laid out a little bit differently. You can see there's a big image, some call to action buttons, things like that. This site's a little bit more simple in its design, but again, it's running WordPress. And then as you can see from these past few examples, these are all sort of for creative type people or agencies, that they all have fairly different visual looks to their websites. You can make WordPress look like anything. And then basically you have your design, and then you can put in whatever content you want. And the content is really what's going to distinguish yourself from any other website. Some big companies also use WordPress. So the New Yorker is one of those. They just recently redid their entire site, and it's now 100% running on WordPress, which is really cool. A lot of journalists like to use, a lot of journalists are working for companies or media outlets that use WordPress for all of their systems. And the WordPress, the way you actually work with WordPress in the administration interface, is really user-friendly, and so that's why it started to become very popular among big media organizations. There's another site, Nancy Pelosi just redid her site with WordPress. This is an example of a really user-friendly website. It's got a lot of sort of interactive graphics and things when you actually interact with it. So this is a good example of a type of site that really will draw in visitors. And as you can see, again, there isn't like a standard site or a standard look that looks like WordPress. WordPress can really look like anything or do anything. Vogue is another site that's using WordPress. I don't know much about it, but apparently it's popular.
How do you know a site is using WordPress?
Yes, so you can, and the good thing is now you can't typically tell just when you're looking at a given site. There are a few clues that most people can see. One of those is the links. Once you go into subpages, a lot of sites will have like a .html at the end of the URL or the link. WordPress is never going to have that, and you're almost always going to have really nicely formatted URLs. You're not going to have a bunch of random numbers in them. If you ever look at sort of the URLs when you're like on a Google Doc or something, you'll see that they're really long and they've got all these sort of random numbers in them. WordPress always has really clean things, so when you create a post, WordPress automatically creates a URL for that post by taking the post title and then making it all lowercase, and then it adds hyphens in between each word. And so it does things like that to really make it good, because that also optimizes for search engines by having clean URLs. So that's one that you can usually tell if it's using WordPress or something similar. And then of course you can also look at the code, is what I do.
Would it say something like powered by WordPress?
Yes. A lot of sites will even say proudly powered by WordPress at the bottom. The other thing is when you look at, if you just have like an image file, that you might even typically, like if you're doing a Google image search and you find an image or whatever, when you click through to that single image file view in the browser where it's just got like a .jpeg or .png extension on it, if there's a WP-content in the URL somewhere, that means it's using WordPress. So that's another way you can sometimes tell. But yeah, a lot of sites, and then of course the bigger ones like this typically will change some of those things, so you may not be able to tell. I'm guessing their images aren't stored in WP content, they're probably storing them somewhere else. But you can typically tell that way. So those were some bigger companies. WordPress is also used for like blogs, so this is like a personal blog about books running on WordPress.com, which is a hosted version of WordPress, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Microsoft, all of their official blogs are now running on WordPress. As I mentioned at the beginning, WordPress was originally known primarily as a blogging platform, but it has expanded a lot more broadly now to be used for any type of a website. So here's another one. Again, this is a completely different look visually, but it's still running the same software on the back end, and it's still managed using the same administration interface. LA Times, their media site is on WordPress. And then a lot of USC websites are now using WordPress. They're sort of slowly, bit by bit, transitioning over different sites. So the website for the new University Village construction is all running WordPress right now, and that's actually a pretty nice one. It's got really big images and a very immersive experience. This is a site that I run for one of the student organizations I'm involved with. And again, you can see in this case it really leverages images. This is actually running on the default theme or design that WordPress comes with right now. So even though it's sort of the default out-of-the-box look, it still looks like a really nice professional website. This is one of my personal websites. This is sort of a bunch of random assorted projects and things, and so it's using a much different look. It's not trying to be very professional or very readable necessarily. It's just sort of abstract and artistic. But then this is like my personal, more professional site on the other hand, which is also using WordPress. So all of those sites that I just showed you are running WordPress. As you can see, you can do pretty much anything with it and make it fit whatever needs you have. I'll show you a little bit now about the WordPress admin. So those are all WordPress on what we call the front end. That's the public-facing part of the site. On the back end, or the administration interface, it looks something like this. So this is called the dashboard, and from here you can get to all of the different ways to manage your site. So for example, WordPress sites out of the box have posts, and so these are basically for a blog. Posts are used for things where it's maybe time sensitive, whereas you would use a static page. for something that's going to be like an about page, or maybe if you have a contact page. And then your blog posts will be updated frequently, posting new ones, but not typically editing existing blog posts. So when you're adding a post, you have an interface that looks something like this. You can put in a title, and then there's a content area, and then there are a whole bunch of different things that you can do to categorize your post to help users find them. We'll see if this works. Okay, here we go. So this sort of is a video that just walks through what it looks like to actually write a post in WordPress. So you can see you can put in your title, and then you can write in your content here. This is a visual editor, just like what you would have with Microsoft Word. So the idea is that what you see here will be similar to what you see on the public front end of your website. You can also add media, and then images, audio, video, whatever it is can be managed directly within WordPress. And there are a whole bunch of other features that you can get into as you get into WordPress more. So then once you publish your post, then you can look at the front end of the website. So this is all the administration. Then here, that's the public part of the site that people actually see. And I can show you an actual demo in a minute if you want to see more about that. We also have really good media management tools in WordPress. So as you can see here, this is what the media library looks like. So it's very similar to what you might find in any software that you would have just on your computer to manage your pictures or any other types of media that you upload. In addition to images, you can upload audio files or videos, and you can also upload PDFs or other types of documents depending on what you need for your type of website. This is another demo. This is showing some of the visual customization options. And so you can see here, this is a different interface that WordPress provides now that allows you to preview the front end of the website while you're making changes over in this panel on the left. And so if you want to change the color of the background, for example, you can do that over here and then get a live preview of what it looks like before actually publishing those changes to the public front end of the website. As you can see, that's a pretty nice interface, and you can use sort of different, they're called themes, that provide different starting points, and then each theme will have different ways that you can customize it so that your site looks just how you want it in terms of the framework. And then, of course, all of your content goes in within that. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about other reasons to use WordPress besides just that you can pretty much do anything with it. One of the really big things with WordPress is that it's completely free. And that's not just in terms of like being a free product, it's free as in printing, but it is also free as in speech. And basically, what that means is that the mission of WordPress is to democratize publishing. So WordPress is really there so that you can create a site and have an online presence, regardless of who you are, where you live, or any other factors. There are no restrictions to what you can say with WordPress. So if you have something to say, you can utilize WordPress to say that. It's not something that's going to be censored or anything like that. And of course, on the free as in printing side, it's completely free software to download and use. I'll talk a little bit more about how that works in a minute. But the other thing that goes into that is it's an open source project. And so the people who actually create it don't work for WordPress. So in WordPress 4.0, which is the most recent version that came out a couple weeks ago, these are all these people, and then all of these people are all of the different people who contributed to it. So there are over 275, I think, different contributors to WordPress 4.0, and none of them work for WordPress. You may have heard of a company called Automatic, and that is the company that is behind WordPress.com, which I'll talk about in a minute. WordPress.com uses WordPress, but they're not the ones who actually create WordPress. Some of the people who work for WordPress.com do work on WordPress itself, and it's about half of the project leaders, but then once you get into contributing developers who are sort of the next level down in the leadership, only a couple of them work for Automatic. Most of them work for other companies. Either they work for just a regular web development agency that donates their time to work on WordPress, or a lot of these people actually just donate their time to work on WordPress completely on a volunteer basis, because either they might use WordPress as a freelancer and create websites for clients, or maybe they're just interested in WordPress because they have their own blog with it, and they're interested in contributing back to the software to make it better. Regardless of the reasons, there's a huge community of people who actually work on making WordPress and making it better. And that's why every time there's a new version of WordPress, all of those improvements are not just because of one or two people, but really a massive group of people who contribute to making it better. And that's why it's continued to evolve. It's now 23% of the internet. That's not something that you could achieve if you just had one company behind the project. It's really become a much larger scale. And because of that, of course, it's really important that there's a diverse set of contributors working on it, always improving it. And then that makes sure that it continues to evolve for the long run, basically. I mentioned WordPress.com. WordPress.com is a hosted version of WordPress. And basically what that means is that you can go to WordPress.com and you can pick a username and you can create an account and have a site up and running that's using WordPress in a matter of minutes. And it's all completely free as long as you're okay with some of the restrictions that WordPress.com has. So if you wanted to have a domain name like nickhalsey.wordpress.com, you could get that totally for free and set up a site there right now. You would have a few restrictions in how much you can customize the appearance of the site, and in terms of what different types of features you can add on to the software. But the basic software of WordPress is available there. They have a whole bunch of different options for you to choose from, and then they offer premium upgrades that you can pay for to add additional features or additional customization beyond what you get sort of out of the box. On the other hand, WordPress.org, or self-hosted WordPress, is completely free and you never have to pay for anything with it. And basically what that means, it's not hosted, which means you actually get the download. Anyone can go on to WordPress.org and download the software, but then you actually have to install it so that you can start using it. Now, you do that typically through a web host. And so there are a whole bunch of different hosting agencies that are there to host websites. And most of them actually let you sign up for an account there, and then they have like a one-click install, and you click a button and then it installs WordPress for you, and then you have WordPress on your self-hosted site. Now for hosting companies, you usually have to basically always need to pay a fee, and it's usually like a monthly or annual fee for the hosting service that they provide. And so that'll cover your domain name and then the actual space on the web server, which is basically a internet connected computer that's always on where that software is running. Once you get that set up though, it works very similarly to WordPress.com. It's always there, it's on your site, and you can go do whatever you want with it. The key difference with self-hosted versus WordPress.com is that you can install your own plugins and you can install your own themes, whereas WordPress.com has a set of plugins and themes that are sort of built in and you can pick from them, but you don't get to choose which new ones you add. Basically what plugins are a way that you can add new features. So you might have a plugin that adds social media integration, or a plugin that lets you create a contact form. There are a whole bunch of different plugins, and I'm doing a session on that later today, actually, just on plugins. But the basics is sort of plugins are extra features you can add on. There are over 32,000 free plugins that are available on WordPress.org that you can install right from your WordPress admin when you're running a self-hosted version. WordPress.com, they have a whole bunch of plugins built in that come activated with it, but you can't install your own because they're on sort of a shared environment there. And then of course, if you ever want to do like a completely custom design, it's called a custom theme, which would be basically a custom layout and template for how the site's actually displayed. That's all done only on self-hosted, because on self-hosted you can change any code or anything on the technical side of it, whereas on .com it's very restricted in that side because it's a shared environment with a whole bunch of other, actually millions of other sites and blogs running on it.
So for the average person, which one is
is better.
You would recommend.
Yeah. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of WordPress.com just because you do reach a point fairly quickly once you start to learn it, where you start to want more, and there's only so far that you can go with it without having to buy some of their upgrades. If you're a little bit tech savvy and sort of know how to use software and are typically good with computers, you can probably figure out how to get your own self-hosted site set up, and then start adding on new plugins or themes as you want to, as you sort of keep going.
But if you're not tech savvy, you might want to.
Yeah, if you're not tech savvy at all, that might be more of a challenge for you. And so in that case, it might make more sense to go with WordPress.com. In the end, in terms of cost, once you get into something that's fairly customized, there is a chance that it could actually end up costing more on WordPress.com than .org, but that's not necessarily the case, and it just sort of depends on how custom you're going, and really how much you want to do with it. As a just basic starting point, WordPress.com is really good. It's a really easy way to just sort of jump in and start playing around. Once you get more serious, you might want to think about doing a self-hosted one just because it really gives you the flexibility to do whatever you want with it. Any other questions on .com versus .org? Okay. And then the last broad thing I want to talk about is a little bit about the WordPress community. And again, this is one of the big reasons that WordPress is so big now and powers such a large portion of the internet. So WordPress has support forums that are available on WordPress.org, where anyone can go and ask a question, and then anyone can go in and answer questions. And this is a really, really good way to get help with anything that it is that you might have issues with for self-hosted WordPress sites. On WordPress.com, they have their own support forums that are also very helpful. .org, since everything's completely volunteer-based, you basically have volunteers who will go in and answer any questions that you post here, or other users. If you go in and post a question asking about maybe, hey, I was able to figure out how to get it set up, but now I'm having trouble figuring out how to create a page and make it get a link to my page added to the homepage of the site or something. You might be able to go in and ask that question, but then you might see, oh, well, this person's having problems with the thing that I just did and was able to figure out, so maybe I can help them. So it's more of a community. People can help each other. Everyone knows something, even if you don't realize it, and there's always a question that you can answer, and there's always probably a question that you can ask that someone else can answer. So this is a really good way to leverage the fact that so many people use WordPress and have knowledge about it if you're sort of looking to get started but having some problems or run into any issues at any point. There are also several WordPress news websites. You'll see occasionally news about WordPress floating around in some of the bigger, well-known tech-related publications. A lot of them have a lot of misinformation, though. And so these are some of the sites, WP Tavern and Post Status, and then, of course, the official blog, that have sort of offer perspective on not just the software itself, but also the community and some of the big names and big things that are happening in the industry. Another thing I don't think I mentioned yet with self-hosted sites is that you can buy plugins and themes from third-party vendors. There are a lot of free ones available. There are also premium ones available when you want something that's a little bit more customized or something that will come with product support for it. And so for those, you can get those and add those on. So there's a whole industry for that as well. And these blogs also cover those industries and sort of what's happening with premium themes and plugins, who some of the big players are, and when a really exciting new product comes out, they will typically report on that. Then there, of course, is also a whole network of websites related to actually making WordPress. And that's not just about developing the actual software, but it's also working on the support forums, working on documentation, all sorts of other things. There are mobile apps for WordPress for iOS and Android. that you can connect to either your WordPress.com blog or your self-hosted one. So the whole WordPress ecosystem, all the contributors sort of funnel through here. So even if you're not interested in contributing, at some point it's always an interesting place to look to see what might be coming in the next version of WordPress or things like that. A really valuable resource is WordPress.tv. This contains all sorts of different presentations, typically from conferences, and other how-to guides in video format. And so they have topics ranging from the very basics of how to get started with WordPress, why to use WordPress, content strategy, how to get people coming to your site and staying there, things like that, all the way into more advanced development topics and coding. So it's a really nice resource with a broad range of different presentations. So if you learn well from presentations, this is probably a good resource to look at, even just for inspiration of what some things that might be useful for your particular site that you're working on. And then finally, there are also several in-person events that the WordPress community facilitates. Most of the people who get involved in any way with the community or work with WordPress mostly interact with other people working on WordPress online. And so these are ways where, once a month, like-minded people who use WordPress can meet up and maybe have a speaker talk to them about different opportunities. There are also WordCamps, which are the official WordPress conferences. These happen usually in a given city once a year. So there was one in Los Angeles like a week ago, I guess, that had about 500 people at it. So there's really a big community around WordPress. And of course, here at Annenberg, with this space and the help desk, we also have the resources right here to get help with WordPress in person and even to just talk about ideas. So a few basics in summary about the community. There's actually a thing in WordPress that makes it so that anytime you write WordPress in a post, it makes sure that it's correctly capitalized. WordPress has a capital P and a capital W. Some people can get kind of angry if you use a lowercase p, and that's one of the biggest things when anyone's writing about WordPress that makes it look like you don't know what you're talking about, basically, for people who know WordPress. So always use a capital W and a capital P